So we're going to be learning today a little continuation of what we started on last week, which was the process flow. So we moved on to process flow diagrams, and we've spent some sessions talking about process flow overview. And I want to spend this session to be more of a practical example of how do we work on process flow problems. So in this session, we're going to be doing some live practice with some smaller use cases, but it's great for you to just get the hang of thinking through the process flow and using the tools to create the process flow. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if you guys can see it. All right, so we have some case studies that we're going to practice with. I'm going to skip over the expense report. We did this earlier today, which was an example of how you use swim lanes. So in the expense report, it was how do you create a process flow map around an expense report. So typically, as it says here, you have an employee needs to get reimbursed for a travel, and you need to create the process flow diagram that has the swim lanes that include the employer, the manager, the finance department, and the main steps of getting reimbursement for an expense would be the employee need to submit an expense report. The manager needs to approve the expense report or request that the employee make the changes. Then the finance department needs to review and process the payment, and then the employee will receive the reimbursement. And this happens to me all the time. Like you guys know, I travel a lot. So sometimes in my role, I go to other countries sometimes, or we move in the US. So for example, they send me out of the country to do a workshop in some other place. They'll pay for my air travel, they'll pay for my hotel, and then if I need to purchase anything like food or, I don't know, Uber rides or whatever, then I would pay for that out of my pocket. And when I come back, I would put all my receipts together, put it in an expense report, send that report to my manager, they will approve it, it goes to finance, processes the payment, I get the money back in my account. So this is a typical thing that we often do. So in the earlier session, we had done this together with the group, and this was the result of this process that we had developed together. So if you guys remember, we're going to do this together, but if you remember, we talked about the main shapes that you use when you are doing a flow diagram. Now, there are many shapes, but you don't need to do all of them, right? So let me just step back for a moment. So there's so many shapes in here, but the reason why I want to narrow it down for you is because you don't have to use all of the shapes that's there, not because it's in the system and you have to use it. These are the shapes, all the ones in color, that you typically need to use, and they can be used to represent any process. Terminator, process, decision, document, multiple documents, on-page connector, which is a circle, off-page connector, and then at times you might need to use this database, which is a cylinder, okay? So that's what I was saying. So these are the main shapes. You can model anything with that. So let's go back to the problem. So what we're solving is this, right? We are solving the problem of reimbursing an expense report. So we already know we need swim lanes. When did you use swim lanes? You use swim lanes when the action is being done by multiple roles, and you want to show each role and what they do. So we have already done this with the other group. I'm going to walk you through that, and then I'm going to do one that you haven't done yet from scratch, right? So this is what we worked on today. It takes a little while to scroll. All right, so we have 3 swim lanes: employee, manager, and finance department, right? So we start the process with the employee is the one that starts the process, like me when I come back from my trip, right? I create an expense report, and I add the receipts. I can use the multi-document shape to represent the fact that I'm adding receipts to my expense report. Because if I go to the lounge and I go order a cocktail, and then I order my lobster, and the whole bill comes to $80, I need to prove that this $80 is related to my trip. So I need to upload the proof, which is the receipt. So once I upload the proof, then, and look, you need to notice where the arrows are going. So these arrows, this just represents an extension of this printing on the report, right? but it's really going in this direction. So then I submit my report to the manager, but it's still in the employee swim lane because the employee is the one submitting it to the manager. Once it goes to the manager, and again, pay attention to the arrows, then when the manager gets it, the manager is going to review the report. And then the next thing the manager is going to do is say, is this report correct? Like when you look at each line item, does it match? Am I putting stuff in there from when I went on a date a week ago, right? And trying to get the company to pay for my date, right? So you make sure there's no fraud going on. Karaleise is not doing anything untoward. And once one of the things that happens to me a lot, I was saying to you earlier, is that when I go to a foreign country, like I went to Montreal, I take the Uber from my house to the airport because parking over 2 days or so in Atlanta airport is very expensive these days. So I don't do that no more. So I take the Uber, and then I would go. I'll probably eat something in the airport, depending on how rushed I am. Then I would go to Montreal. And when I get to Montreal, I take the Uber from Montreal to my hotel. So the Uber charge between my home to the airport is in US dollars. But the Uber from Canadian airports to Montreal is in Canadian dollars. So sometimes when I'm doing my expense report, I forget to switch the currencies. And the manager might come back to me and say, oh, Karaleise, you forgot that this is in actual Montreal, so it can't be USD, it needs to be CAD. Oh, yeah. And I go back and I fix it, right? So if there's an error that they've noticed, could be not just fraud, but it could just be an error that you didn't notice, or you put a wrong date or something, who knows, or a wrong category, or sometimes you have to choose if it's billable or not. But these systems can have different things. So if there's any error, it goes back to the employee, and the employee needs to update the report and then submit it again. And if you notice, this kind of creates like a circle. It's what we call a loop, where this can happen over and over again. I could submit it again to the manager, and he find another error, send it back to me, I update it, I submit it again, find more errors, and so we can do this for a while. The only way to get out of it is if there is no more errors. So you'll be stuck in this loop until you find an exit, which is the only exit here is that there's no more errors. Another exit could be that I just decide not to resubmit it anymore. But in that case, it wouldn't go here, right? But it's an edge case. It's not a happy pass. Typically doesn't happen that you just decide, oh, I'm going to, eat this expense, right? You can always jump out of the process at any point, but it's very unlikely. So once the report is good, then the manager submits it to the finance department. Now, if you notice, the employee never interacts directly with the finance department. It's always the employee to the manager to the finance department. So once it goes to the finance department, then they have to also review it to see if it's correct. Maybe the manager is reviewing it in terms of, am I at the right hotel? Am I at the right airport? Because they know the details of the trip that I'm taking. But the finance department is making sure, do we have the right categorization? Is it going to be billed to the right client? Is it, all these little category stuff that they put on it for accounting purposes? Is it accounting purposes accurate? So they might say, oh, we have an issue. If they have an issue, if it's not correct, it goes back to the manager. The manager needs to review it again. And then if he has any problems, he'll submit it back to the employee. And this also becomes a loop. So if you notice, there's two loops going on here. There's a loop between the manager and the employee here. And then there's a loop between the the manager and the finance department here. The only way to get out of this loop is if the report is correct. And if it is, then the finance department will process the reimbursement. And this is a predefined process. I didn't spend much time on that, but let me explain this right now. So a predefined process as opposed to a regular process, it has the two lines at the side to differentiate it. But why this is going to be the most useful process for you as you design your process flows is because you can use the predefined process to indicate that there are many other steps in this process, but it's predefined. It's already been done somewhere else. It already exists. So we don't have to map out every single step. So, for example, processing a reimbursement has its own set of steps. Maybe I have to enter it into some accounting system. Then I have to make sure the bank account of the company is debited with the amount of the reimbursement. And then I'm going to go over here and do a transfer in online banking. I don't know, whatever those steps are, right? I put it in my ledger, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the process is, you don't have to spend all your time plotting out that existing process. You can just say this reimbursement process already exists. We already know how to do this part, and at the end result is that it's going to be reimbursed. But normally you assume the happy path when you have a predefined process, right? So you don't have to build out all of this, because if that was the case, every time you do a process flow, it'd be miles and miles long, because every single process would have to be built out from scratch. So the predefined process helps you to just indicate that this is already existing, it already works, and it gives me a result. So once that process, the reimbursement is processed, then the next step is to do what? Give me my money, right? So then I will know that the process is ended because I got the money in my bank account. Once I got the money in my bank account, then that's it. Process is ended, right? So this is a simple process flow. In the real world of work, you'll be surprised if you ever get something so simple, okay? But this is the kind of quality process map that you should be able to be comfortable to do. And hopefully by being at the back office club, we can do it much faster. This is what it should look like. It should be clean. It should have straight lines. People should be able to follow it clearly. You should be able to see where you're making a decision. You should see which action is being done by which role. It needs to be looking something like this. All right. Okay, let's do one together.